All right, we're going to tackle Sonnet 130 here. This video is going to be quite a bit shorter than my last one. I'm trying to make these little tutorials a bit more brief. Again, Sonnet 130, how do we tell it's a sonnet? Well, it's fairly simple. We just look at the title. It says 130. But had the title not been there, and we wanted to know what type of sonnet this is, or if it is even in fact a sonnet. Count the lines. There should be 14 lines here, then I'll put down 14 lines, and it should be an iambic pentameter. Now remember what iambic pentameter is. It is a series of stressed and unstressed syllables totaling 5 metrical beats or 10 syllables. So you count them by mistress eyes or nothing like the sun. Oh, there's 10 there. Coral is far more than her lips read. 10 there, and that must be iambic pentameter. As well, there needs to be a rhyme scheme, some sort of rhyme scheme. One of the real giveaways here is looking at the couplet at the end. Ask yourself, do the last 2 lines rhyme? If they do, a rhyming couplet, that is a characteristic of an English or Shakespearean sonnet. So that way we know what we're dealing with. So I'm going to erase this here so we have a little bit of room for our lines here. So let's tackle this. The first line, he says, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." And right away, that opening line is a shocking line for readers, especially when you consider that he is writing about his mistress. He says, "My mistress," and it doesn't say my wife, my girlfriend. He says, "My mistress." There's an intimate connection here between the speaker and the object of the poem. But then he takes a decidedly negative slant here with his comparison. Nothing like the sun, and right away, we would have recognized eyes like the sun, full of light, being a standard, really Petrarchan metaphor. Now, we remember from our previous video, in our previous classes, Petrarchan metaphors were employed in order to increase the value of a person by comparing them to the chief item, such as, silk being the fabric. Your hair is like silk, or your eyes are like diamonds. They sparkle, they're full of light, they're very valuable. And all of these sorts of comparisons are intended to increase the value or status of the object being compared. And so he is saying she's nothing like the sun. So really, he's defining her in negative rather than the positive right now. And so and much like Sonnet 18, he is going to go through, after he's made a statement, he's going to go through and he's going to list things. And he begins with coral. Coral is far more red than her lips read. Red is also a color that is associated with passion, vitality. And he's saying that coral is far redder than her lips. It could be that he's also implying that perhaps maybe she's not the most passionate person, but that doesn't matter. As we go on towards the end of the sonnet, we'll see that doesn't matter. He says, "If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun." He looks at another color. White is being used here, and white often is a color associated with purity and goodness, and perhaps maybe suggesting that on a metaphorical or a figurative level, that she may not be the most pure or good angelic person around. She is perhaps maybe not bad, but I think perhaps maybe a bit human. He uses the word dun here, and dun's an interesting word. It's really brown, or has a light brown beige, not sickly, but the very fact that her skin actually has color. It's not sort of porcelain white, and white being the idea of white skin really being associated with class, wealth, and privilege during this time. As we see in other cultures, where sort of your physical appearance is an indicator of your status. Here we have her class, white skin, not having to work, go out in the sun, so not being in danger of getting any color in her skin, shows that she does live a life of wealth and privilege. It's kind of interesting, too, when we look at society today or culture today, an indicator of a life of wealth and privilege is having a tan, being able to have the, luxury of going, traveling, relaxing in the sun while others are working. And so, that sort of, we see that changes, as society changes, but again, that's a different conversation. Now he goes on and he says, if hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. And he's talking about wires. And this is where he begins to depart from the Petrarchan, standard Petrarchan metaphor. And normally, the thing we would use to compare hair to would be silk, or something else soft and valuable. But he's saying, no. If they're wires, then black wires grow on her head. And it's interesting to here we have an indication of her hair color. And what's fascinating about this is it maybe it starts to perhaps maybe suggest that the speaker here, or even Shakespeare here, is writing about that the standard. The true love, the mistress with raven hair and mournful eyes that people talk about, that he was truly in love with. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I certainly don't like to get the author and the speaker confused, because so often the tendency is to confuse the two, and they're not the same. He says, I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And this is really interesting, because we can take this on two levels. The first level here is we're going to look at the damask rose here. That damask rose was a very rare and valuable rose that was mottled red and white. And here, let me get my E there. Rare and valuable. It was prized for its beauty. Unlike other roses, it was very, very unique. And so we have that. But then we also have this other idea here. We have the idea of the rose, and this brings in another idea that I like to touch on, and that is the idea of the sub rosa, or beneath the rose, which is oftentimes used as a symbol of secrecy. Right? There are secrets. And he says, I don't see roses in her cheeks. It could be that the speaker is suggesting that she does not have secrets. She does not have an ulterior motive or agenda hidden behind her face. She's not, what you see is what you get. And now we're starting to step back. We look at the first two quatrains here as we're making our way through the second quatrain. She's starting to look very real, very authentic. And we're going to continue and see where that goes. He says, in some perfumes there is more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. So again, perfume, this idea of perfume. A perfume is the purpose and function of a perfume, especially during the Renaissance, is to mask smells. Quite. In much the same way that spices were originally used to make food that was tremendously unpalatable, palatable, meat well beyond its expiry date. Perfume is not, it's not meant to clean, and it's not meant to make things sanitary, but rather to mask the unsanitary. And so there's a certain falseness, if you want to look at perfume. It creates a false image or a false presentation. And that's fascinating, because now we're starting to see that authenticity is being compared to falseness. And so I'm going to look at the top of your screen here, the real versus the perceived. Sorry, my pen is cutting out on me. Yes, it does spell perceived. The real versus perceived. And what is real and what is seen? Imagery versus authenticity. And so he says, then I love to hear, and this is the neat part for me. He chooses the word reeks here, which is tremendously unflattering. I don't want to have breath that reeks, nor does anybody else. But her breath reeks. However, he switches gears here, and this is what I really like. This is probably my favorite part of the sonnet, and this is the one that I really spend a lot of time on. He says, I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. This is the first time that he says anything positive about her. Everything else is negative, but this is the first time he says anything positive, and this is hidden within something negative. He makes an admission that music is more beautiful than her voice, or at least more pleasing here. And here, Control Z there, and we'll get rid of that one. Anyway, pleasing. There we go. He says that music's more pleasing, but what's really key here is the first part of this statement. I love to hear her speak, and that is what I center on. So we'll just look over here. It's what is important to her, and this is the idea of sound versus substance. He is more concerned with the words behind the sound, and it is about her ideas and words. And this is why I often will look at Shakespeare as a sort of a proto-feminist, reluctantly feminist, but a proto-feminist, where he is, and what I mean by, for my students out there, proto-feminist, he's sort of at the cutting edge of ideas and introducing ideas, and we see that, throughout his plays. A great example is Portia. Even though at the end of Merchant of Venice, he pulls back, the very fact that he goes forward at all and presents Portia in such an amazing light and is such a strong and intellectually capable character, that is incredible. But anyway, we'll talk more about that as we move into Shakespeare later. But anyway, he says he actually likes to hear her speak. He likes to hear her ideas. And it could suggest that he approaches her as an equal, as a co-equal, that they have a relationship that's built not on physical appearances, although there could be physical attraction. She is not the ideal woman. Simply put, the ideal woman doesn't exist. She is a fiction. She's a fiction in the same way that sort of, the ideal woman is photoshopped in many adverts now. You could suggest that perhaps maybe the ideal woman in poetry during this period was, Petrarchan shopped or metaphor shopped to death and therefore didn't exist. Though I couldn't imagine people walking around comparing themselves to these, metaphors, to these Petrarchan metaphors. But what he does is he really admits that this woman satisfies him. He loves to hear. He doesn't want her to remain silent. Now, we'll move on here, and he says, "I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground." And again, this idea of walking and treading. She walks and she treads. And she doesn't float. She doesn't, I don't know what a goddess would do. I've never seen one. The old saying, show me an angel and I'll paint you one. But this idea of treading, this is a word that I really try to focus on when I look at this poem, is when you tread, you leave a mark. You leave footprints. You are, moving through the world and having an impact. So it's kind of interesting that idea of impact follows speech. Right? And so she has an impact as she moves through the world. And he really kind of, and she's very grounded, right? She's very earthy, she's very grounded, she's very authentic. And he sums up the whole song here in the couplet at the end. He says, "And yet by heaven I think my love is rare as any she belied with false compare." This idea here is rarity. He's gone through a lot of the Petrarchan metaphors here using objects that are very rare: perfumes, damask roses, coral. And he's saying, yeah, those things are rare, but my love is rare, my relationship is rare, and by default it is precious and wonderful. And I don't need to use false comparisons, these false Petrarchan metaphors, to make it into something it's not. What it is good enough. And yeah, that's my take on Sonnet 130. So if you have any other ideas or stuff I've missed, I'd love to hear.